Sometimes the heaviest burden we carry is the weight of our own loneliness. For Eli Stoltzfus, that weight had grown heavier with each passing winter since his wife's death 3 years ago. In the winter of 1894, his small Amish farm in Pennsylvania stood quiet against the endless snow. His days followed the same pattern: morning prayers, evening chores, simple meals eaten in silence. The empty chair at his kitchen table remained a constant reminder of all he had lost. But on this December night, as a fierce snowstorm battered his windows, a soft knock came at his door. When Eli opened it, he found a small girl shivering in the cold. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, her face red from the bitter wind. In her thin arms, she held a bundle wrapped in an old blanket. What she carried would change his life forever. What desperate journey had brought this child to his doorstep in the middle of a blizzard? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eli's weathered hands trembled as he reached for the door handle, not from the cold that swept through his modest kitchen, but from something deeper, a recognition he couldn't yet name. The child before him swayed on her feet, her small frame barely visible through the swirling snow that had been falling since dawn. Her dark hair hung in damp strands beneath a threadbare woolen cap, and her brown eyes held a weariness that no child should carry. "Come in, child," Eli said gently, stepping aside to let her enter. "Quickly now, before the cold takes you both." The girl hesitated at the threshold, clutching her bundle tighter against her chest. Eli could see her scanning his kitchen. The simple wooden table, the cast-iron stove radiating warmth, the oil lamp casting dancing shadows on whitewashed walls. Everything spoke of the plain, ordered life he had built here on this 40-acre farm outside Lancaster County. "It's all right," he assured her, his voice soft with the patience that came from years of gentling skittish horses and coaxing life from reluctant soil. "No harm will come to you here." She stepped across the threshold, leaving small puddles of melted snow on the scrubbed pine floors. Up close, Eli could see the exhaustion etched into her young face, the way her shoulders sagged with a burden far too heavy for someone so small. The bundle in her arms stirred slightly, and a tiny fist emerged from the warm blanket. "Mein Gott," Eli whispered, reverting to the Pennsylvania Dutch that came naturally in moments of surprise. "A baby." The child carried a baby. "Please, sir," the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need help. Samuel, he's been crying, and I don't know what to do anymore." Her words carried the faint accent of someone not born to these parts, softer somehow than the local speech he knew. Eli felt something shift in his chest, a stirring he hadn't experienced in the 3 years since Sarah's death. He moved to the stove, ladling warm milk from the pot he'd kept simmering for his evening coffee. The familiar motions grounded him, reaching for his best cup, the one Sarah had cherished, with its delicate blue flowers painted around the rim. "Sit," he instructed gently, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table. Not Sarah's chair, he couldn't bring himself to offer that, but the one beside it. "Warm yourself while I tend to the little one." As the girl settled into the chair with visible relief, Eli caught sight of his reflection in the darkened window. A man of 42 years looked back at him, his brown beard streaked with premature gray, his face lined from too many seasons working under the Pennsylvania sun. The black suspenders over his plain blue work shirt, the simple broad fall trousers, everything marked him as Amish, as apart from the English world beyond his farm's borders. But it was the gold band on his left hand that caught his attention. Now, Sarah's gift to him on their wedding day 18 years ago. He still wore it, though the community had long since stopped expecting him to. Some said it showed his dedication to her memory. Others whispered it proved he couldn't let go of the past. "What's your name, child?" he asked, testing the milk's temperature on his wrist, as Sarah had taught him to do when they'd hoped for children of their own. "Anna," she replied, watching his careful preparations. "Anna Morrison, and this is my brother Samuel." She adjusted the blanket around the baby's face, revealing a tiny nose and rosebud lips. "He's only 3 months old, sir. Born in September, just before." Her voice caught, and she looked away. Eli poured the warm milk into a small glass, adding a touch of honey the way Sarah used to prepare it for the neighborhood children who sometimes visited. The memory came unbidden, Sarah laughing as young Mary Yoder spilled milk down her apron, Sarah's gentle hands wiping sticky fingers clean. They had dreamed of such moments with children of their own, but God had chosen a different path for them. "Before what, Anna?" he asked gently, offering her the milk. She wrapped her small hands around the glass, savoring its warmth. "Before Mama and Papa got the fever. It came through our town like wildfire, sir. Took near everyone, including—" She stopped, pressing her lips together in a line that spoke of tears already shed and strength found in the aftermath. Eli felt his heart constrict. He knew about fever, about loss that came swift and merciless. Sarah had been taken by consumption, a slower death but no less final. He had held her hand through those last difficult months, watched her waste away despite his prayers, his desperate bargaining with the Almighty. "Where did you come from, Anna?" he asked, settling into his own chair across from her. The baby stirred in her arms, making soft mewling sounds. "Millerton," she said. "About 3 days' walk from here, I think. Maybe more. I got turned around in the storm yesterday." She looked down at Samuel, whose tiny face was scrunching with hunger. "I've been giving him sugar water when I could find it, but he needs proper milk. I know he does. 3 days' walk in this weather." Eli marveled at the child's determination, her fierce protectiveness over her baby brother. At 8 years old, for surely she was no older, she had made a journey that would challenge grown men. "The folks in Millerton," he said carefully. "They couldn't help you?" Anna's grip tightened on the glass. "There ain't many folks left in Millerton, sir. The fever took most everyone. Those that survived, they lit out for the cities, looking for work or family." She met his eyes directly, and he saw steel beneath the exhaustion. "I wasn't about to let them take Samuel to some institution. I heard tell they separate babies from their family, put them with strangers who don't know their ways." The babies. Cries grew more insistent, and Anna looked up at Eli with desperate hope. "Do you have any milk, sir? Fresh milk? I think he's powerful hungry." Eli rose without a word, moving to the cold cellar where he kept his dairy stores. The cows would need milking again in the morning, but he had enough fresh milk to help this tiny soul through the night. As he poured it into a small pot to warm, he found himself thinking of Sarah's quilting hoop, still sitting in their bedroom upstairs where she had left it 3 years ago. She had been working on a baby quilt, hopeful, despite the years of disappointment. Blue and yellow squares arranged in a pattern called wedding ring, each piece cut with loving precision. After her death, he couldn't bear to move it. The hoop sat beside her side of the bed, needles still threaded, waiting for hands that would never return to complete the work. "Sir?" Anna's voice drew him back to the present. "I don't even know your name." "Eli," he said, testing the milk once more. "Eli Stoltzfus. This is my farm, mine, and—" He caught himself. "Mine now. Are you married, Mr. Stoltzfus?" The question came with a child's innocent directness. "I was," he replied simply. "My Sarah passed on 3 years come February." Anna nodded solemnly, as if she understood loss in ways most children never should. "I'm sorry for your grief, Mr. Stoltzfus. Mama always said that grieving folk need extra kindness." Her words, spoken with such mature compassion, nearly undid him. He busied himself preparing a feeding solution, mixing the warm milk with a touch of water and honey. Sarah had helped deliver enough babies in the community to know such things, and her knowledge had stayed with him. "Now then," he said, settling back at the table, "let's see if we can't help young Samuel here." Anna lifted the baby carefully, and Eli got his first clear look at the child she had carried through the wilderness. Samuel was small for 3 months, his cheeks hollow from hunger, but his eyes were bright and alert. Dark hair crowned his head, and when he opened his mouth to cry, Eli could see he was a healthy child, just desperately in need of proper care. "I've been trying to feed him with my finger," Anna explained, dipping it in whatever I could find. "But I know it's not enough." Eli had seen this method used before, a way to help babies who couldn't properly nurse. He dipped a clean cloth in the warm milk mixture, then offered it to Samuel's seeking mouth. The baby latched on immediately, sucking with the desperation of the truly hungry. "There's a good lad," Eli murmured, and something in his voice caught Anna's attention. She looked at him with curious eyes, perhaps hearing the natural tenderness he couldn't quite hide as Samuel fed. Eli studied the children more carefully. Anna's dress, though well-worn, had been made with care, tiny, even stitches that spoke of a mother's love. Samuel's blanket, despite being threadbare, was knitted in an intricate pattern that would have taken months to complete. These were children who had been loved, cherished, before tragedy struck their family down. "Anna," he said gently, "how long since you've had a proper meal?" She shrugged, but her eyes betrayed her hunger. "I had some bread yesterday. Found it in an abandoned house outside Thornburg." Eli rose again, moving to his pantry. His evening meal had been simple bread, cheese, a bit of preserved sausage, but there was plenty for a growing child. He prepared a plate with more food than Anna had probably seen in days, adding butter and jam Sarah had made from their own strawberries. "Eat," he instructed, setting the plate before her. "You'll be no good to your brother if you waste away." Anna's eyes widened at the bounty, and she began eating with careful, deliberate bites, not wolfing the food as a starving child might, but savoring each morsel with quiet gratitude. Between bites, she watched Eli tend to Samuel, noting how naturally he handled the baby, how his large hands moved with surprising gentleness. "You're good with babies, Mr. Stoltzfus," she observed. "I've helped with enough of them over the years," he replied, though the truth was more complicated. He and Sarah had spent countless hours with the children of friends and neighbors, always hoping their turn would come, their prayers would be answered. Instead, God had chosen to make them uncle and aunt to the community's children, never parents themselves. Samuel finished the makeshift bottle and settled into a contented sleep, his tiny fist curled against Eli's chest. The sensation, the weight of a sleeping child, the soft sounds of breathing stirred something deep in Eli's heart. This was what he and Sarah had dreamed of through all their years of marriage. This simple, profound joy of caring for a child. "Mr. Stoltzfus?" Anna's voice was soft, hesitant. "Could we maybe stay the night? I know we're strangers, and I know it's asking a lot, but Samuel needs rest, and I don't think I can carry him much further." Eli looked at the child before him, this brave, determined girl who had walked through a blizzard to save her baby brother, who spoke with wisdom beyond her years and carried herself with quiet dignity despite her desperate circumstances. Outside, the wind howled around his farmhouse, rattling windows and promising a night too cold for any living thing to survive. The answer came without hesitation. "Of course you can stay. I'll prepare the guest room." Anna's relief was palpable, her shoulders finally relaxing for the first time since she'd appeared at his door. "Thank you, sir. I promise we won't be any trouble. I can help with chores, and Samuel's a good baby when he's not hungry." Eli nodded, already making mental plans. Clean bedding, a warm fire in the guest room, perhaps some of Sarah's old clothes. That might fit Anna. The girl needed proper rest, a chance to recover from her ordeal. And Samuel, the baby, would need regular feeding through the night. Careful tending to ensure his strength returned Dot, as if sensing his thoughts. Anna said quietly, "I can tend to Samuel through the night, sir. I've been doing it for weeks now." "We'll take turns," Eli found himself saying. "A baby is work enough for 2 people, let alone one small girl who's walked herself to exhaustion." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, perhaps, or simply the recognition of shared purpose. Anna smiled for the first time since arriving, and Eli felt another crack form in the walls he'd built around his heart since Sarah's death. "I'll show you to your room," he said, rising with Samuel still in his arms. The baby stirred but didn't wake, trusting this stranger's care with the innocent faith of the very young Dot. As they climbed the narrow stairs to the 2nd floor, Eli caught a glimpse of Sarah's quilting hoop through their bedroom door. The unfinished baby quilt seemed to glow in the lamplight, its careful stitches waiting for completion. For the first time in 3 years, the sight of it didn't bring sharp pain. Instead, he felt something else entirely, a sense of possibility he'd thought was buried forever. Anna noticed his glance toward the bedroom, and her eyes widened at the sight of the quilt. "That's beautiful work," she said softly. "Your wife was a skilled seamstress." "She was," Eli agreed, his voice thick with memory. "She always hoped." He stopped himself, unable to finish the thought. But Anna, with a child's intuitive understanding, nodded knowingly. "She would have been a wonderful mother," she said simply. Dot in the guest room. Eli settled Anna and Samuel with clean linens and extra blankets, building up the fire until warmth filled the small space. Anna tucked Samuel into the center of the bed, surrounding him with pillows to keep him safe, then looked up at Eli with grateful eyes. "Mr. Stoltzfus," she said, "I want you to know whatever happens tomorrow, tonight Samuel will sleep warm and safe for the first time since we left Millerton. That's a gift I can never repay." Eli felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Sleep well, child. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." As he returned to his own room, Eli paused beside Sarah's quilting hoop. In the flickering candlelight, the unfinished squares seemed to tell a story of hope deferred, of love that found no earthly expression. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Eli felt that Sarah's love had found a purpose in 2 small souls who had stumbled through the snow to his door, carrying with them the possibility of healing he'd never thought to find again. Dawn arrived gray and bitter, with frost coating the windows in intricate patterns that reminded Eli of Sarah's lacework. He had slept fitfully, waking 3 times to check on his unexpected guests. Each time, he found Anna curled protectively around Samuel, both children sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. The morning milking couldn't wait, despite the unusual circumstances. Eli dressed quietly and slipped downstairs, banking the fires and setting water to heat before heading to the barn. His 2 cows, Bessie and May, lowed softly at his approach, their breath visible in the frigid air. As he worked, muscle memory guiding his hands, Eli found his thoughts returning to the children upstairs. What was he to do with them? The question had plagued him through the night. Anna's determination to keep Samuel from an institution touched something deep in his heart, but the practicalities were daunting. He was a single man in a community that valued proper order, established procedures. Children didn't simply appear on doorsteps without consequences, without questions that demanded answers. He was carrying the milk pails back to the house. When he heard it, the distinctive clip-clop of hooves on frozen ground, the creak of wagon wheels, Eli's stomach tightened as he recognized the measured pace. Bishop Jacob Lapp made his rounds monthly, checking on families, offering spiritual guidance, ensuring community standards were maintained. Of all the mornings for such a visit, why this one? Ella set the milk pails on his porch and watched as the bishop's black buggy rounded the bend in the farm road. Jacob Lapp was a man of 63 years, his beard white as new snow, his presence commanding the respect and sometimes fear of every soul in their district. He sat straight-backed on the buggy seat, his dark coat and broad-brimmed hat marking his authority as clearly as any crown. "Guten Morgen, Eli," the bishop called, bringing his mare to a stop beside the porch. His keen blue eyes swept over the farmyard, noting everything the extra firewood Eli had brought from the shed during the night. The second set of footprints in the snow leading to his door. "Good morning, Bishop," Eli replied, steadying his voice. "You're out early on such a cold day." "The Lord's work waits for no weather," Jacob said, climbing down from the buggy with surprising agility for his age. In his hand, he carried his walking stick, a length of carved oak that had belonged to his father before him, and his grandfather before that. The stick was more than a tool. It was a symbol of pastoral authority, of the weight of tradition, and divine order that guided their community. "I was passing by and thought to check on you," the bishop continued, his eyes studying Eli's face. "The storm last night was fierce. I trust you weathered it well?" Before Eli could answer, a sound drifted from the house Anna's voice, soft but clear, speaking words of comfort to Samuel. The bishop's expression sharpened, and his grip tightened on the walking stick. "It seems you have visitors," Jacob observed, his tone carefully neutral. "In weather like this, that's unusual." Eli felt the moment of reckoning arrive sooner than he had hoped. There was no hiding the children now, no way to avoid the questions that would follow. "Yes," he said simply. "A young girl and her baby. Brother. They arrived last night, seeking shelter from the storm." "I see." The bishop's voice carried the weight of decades spent shepherding his flock, guiding them through moral complexities and community obligations. "Perhaps I should meet these visitors." There was no refusing such a request, though Eli's heart hammered against his ribs as he led the bishop inside. Anna was at the stove, stirring a pot of porridge with careful attention. Samuel propped in, a chair cushioned with pillows beside her. She had found one of Sarah's old aprons hanging on a peg and tied it around her small waist, the strings wrapped twice to accommodate her size. "Anna," Eli said gently, "this is Bishop Jacob Lapp, the leader of our church community." Anna turned, her face immediately showing the respect that had been bred into her bones. She made a small curtsy, as proper young girls were taught, and kept her eyes downcast. "Good morning, sir. I hope we haven't caused any trouble for Mr. Stoltzfus." Jacob studied the child with the penetrating gaze of a man accustomed to seeing beyond surface appearances. He noted her clean though worn dress, the careful way she tended the baby, the respectful manner of her greeting. "And you are?" "Anna Morrison, sir. This is my brother Samuel." She gestured toward the baby, who was contentedly chewing on a piece of bread Eli had given him. "We're traveling to find family, and the storm caught us unprepared. Mr. Stoltzfus was kind enough to offer a shelter." The bishop's eyes moved between Anna and Eli, reading the situation with the expertise of long experience. "Where is your family, child? Your parents?" Anna's composure wavered slightly, but she maintained her dignity. "They passed on, sir. The fever took them back in Millerton. Samuel and I were all that's left." "I see." Jacob's voice softened fractionally. "And where were you traveling to find this family?" "Philadelphia, sir. I believe we have an uncle there, my father's brother, but I'm not certain of his address." The lie came smoothly, born of desperate necessity. Anna had no uncle in Philadelphia, no family anywhere. But she knew that admitting their complete orphan state would lead to questions about proper placement, about institutions and authorities. The bishop nodded slowly, his experienced eye catching the evasion even as he recognized its necessity. He had seen enough desperate families over the years to understand the fear behind such deceptions. "And how did you come to Mr. Stoltzfus's door?" "We were lost in the storm, sir. His was the first house we saw with lights burning. He took us in and cared for us with Christian kindness. Jacob's gaze turned to Eli, and in those weathered eyes, Eli saw both understanding and concern. The bishop had known him since childhood, had officiated at his marriage to Sarah, had stood beside his grave as they lowered her into the frozen ground. He knew Eli's grief, his loneliness, the way Sarah's death had left him adrift in a community built around family. "Eli," the bishop said quietly, "might we speak privately?" Anna immediately understood the dismissal. "I'll tend to Samuel upstairs, if that's all right, Mr. Stoltzfus. He's due for a feeding soon," as Anna gathered the baby and disappeared up the stairs. Jacob settled into a chair at the kitchen table. Not Sarah's chair, Eli noted, but the one beside it. The bishop's walking stick rested against his knee, and his hands folded over its carved head as he studied Eli's face. "Tell me the truth of it," Jacob said simply. Eli had known this moment would come, but still he struggled with the words. "They appeared at my door last night, just as the girl said. She had walked for days through the storm, carrying her baby brother, seeking safety. What would you have had me do, turn them away to freeze?" "Of course not," Jacob replied. "Christian charity demands we help those in need. But what comes next, Eli? This child speaks of an uncle in Philadelphia, yet something in her manner suggests the story is incomplete." Eli met the bishop's eyes directly. "I believe she fears what might happen if the authorities learn they're truly alone. She's protecting her brother the only way she knows how." "And you? What do you intend?" The question hung heavy in the warm kitchen air. Eli looked toward the stairs where Anna had disappeared, thought of her fierce determination to keep Samuel safe, of the way the baby had settled so peacefully in his arms the night before. "I don't know," he admitted. "I only know they need help, and I have the means to provide it." Jacob was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the worn carvings on his walking stick. "There are proper channels for such things, Eli. Authorities who handle orphan children, institutions designed to care for them. Anna is terrified of being separated from her brother. She walked through a blizzard rather than see him placed with strangers." Eli's voice carried more conviction than he had expected. "Would we not do the same to protect those we love? The community has standards, procedures we follow for good reason," Jacob said gently. "What you describe taking in children who are not family, not properly placed through legal channels, it raises questions of propriety, of proper order. And what of mercy? What of the Good Samaritan who stopped to help a stranger on the road?" The bishop's eyes showed a glimmer of something approval, perhaps, or recognition of the spiritual argument Eli had made. "You invoke Scripture well, my friend, but Scripture also speaks of rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's. There are laws about such matters, English laws that govern even our community." Eli felt the weight of the bishop's words, understanding the delicate position there. Community held within the larger world. The Amish maintained their separate way of life through careful balance, adhering to their beliefs while respecting the laws of the land that granted them that freedom. "I'm not asking to keep them permanently," Eli said, though even as he spoke, he wondered if that was entirely true. "Only to care for them until proper arrangements can be made, until we can be certain they'll be placed somewhere safe, somewhere together." Jacob studied him for a long moment, seeing perhaps more than Eli realized he was revealing. "How long since Sarah's passing has your house echoed with children's voices?" The question struck deep, and Eli felt his throat tighten. 3 years. "But this isn't about filling some void in my life, Jacob. It's about doing what's right for 2 children who have no one else." "Isn't it both?" the bishop asked quietly. "Would that make your desire to help them any less worthy?" Before Eli could answer, they heard Anna's soft voice from upstairs, singing a lullaby to Samuel. The melody drifted down through the floorboards, sweet and clear, filling the kitchen with warmth more profound than any fire could provide. "1 week," Jacob said finally, his decision carrying the authority of his position. I'll give you 1 week to seek the Lord's guidance in this matter, to determine what course is truly best for these children." But Eli, the bishop's voice, grew stern. "If they are to remain longer, proper authorities must be contacted. There are procedures to be followed, laws to be observed. Our community cannot be seen as harboring children outside legal channels." Eli nodded, understanding the compromise the bishop was offering. 1 week to find a solution, 1 week to determine whether there was truly a path forward that would keep Anna and Samuel together while honoring the community's obligations. "Thank you," Eli said simply. Jacob rose, taking up his walking stick. With ceremony that marked the formal end to their discussion, "I'll pray for wisdom for all of us, Eli. This is not a simple matter, and the choices we make will affect more than just these 2 children." As the bishop prepared to leave, Anna appeared at the top of the stairs, Samuel in her arms. She had heard enough of their conversation to understand that their future hung in the balance, that Eli had secured them only temporary safety. "Thank you, Bishop," she called softly, "for your kindness to strangers." Jacob paused at the door, looking back at the small family tableau, Eli standing protective and uncertain, Anna holding Samuel with fierce love, all of them bound together by circumstances none had chosen, but all had accepted. "May God's peace be upon this house," he said formally, then stepped out into the bitter morning air. As the bishop's buggy disappeared down the farm road, Eli closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of the week ahead. 1 week to find answers to questions he barely understood. 1 week to navigate between mercy and law, between his growing attachment to these children and his obligations to his community. Anna descended the stairs slowly, Samuel content in her arms. "Mr. Stoltzfus," she said quietly, "are we in trouble?" Eli looked at her, this brave, responsible child who had taken on burdens no 8-year-old should carry, and felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. "No, Anna," he said firmly, "we're not in trouble. We just have some thinking to do." The first full day with Anna and Samuel passed in a rhythm that felt both foreign and strangely natural to Eli. He had grown accustomed to the solitary pace of his day's morning chores, afternoon repairs, evening prayers spoken to empty rooms. Now his house buzzed with the gentle activity of children, Samuel's contented babbling as Anna fed him, the soft rustle of her movements as she helped with simple tasks, the way firelight caught her dark hair as she sat mending a tear in Samuel's blanket. Anna proved herself remarkably capable for one so young. She seemed to anticipate the baby's needs before he voiced them, warming milk to just the right temperature, changing his swaddling with gentle efficiency. When Eli returned from the barn that morning, he found her scrubbing the kitchen floor, with careful attention to every corner. "You don't need to do that," he told her, setting down his milk pails. "You're a guest here, not a servant." Anna looked up from her work, her face serious. "Mama always said idle hands make for guilty hearts, Mr. Stoltzfus. Besides, you've given us food and shelter. It's only right I help where I can." Her words carried an echo of wisdom that spoke of a mother's careful teaching, of a household where everyone contributed according to their ability. Eli felt a pang thinking of what Anna had lost, not just her parents' lives, but the security of belonging somewhere, of having a place where her efforts were valued and her presence was a joy rather than a burden. That afternoon, as Samuel napped in a basket beside the kitchen stove, Anna approached Eli with something clutched in her small fist. Her face was solemn, the expression of a child about to reveal a treasured secret. "Mr. Stoltzfus," she said quietly, "I want to show you something that belonged to my mama." She opened her palm to reveal a silver locket, tarnished with age but still beautiful. Its surface was engraved with delicate roses, and though the chain was broken, Anna had knotted it carefully to keep the pendant secure. It was her most precious thing, Anna explained, settling beside Eli at the table. She said it held all the love in the world. With reverent fingers, she opened the locket to reveal a small photograph, a family portrait showing a young woman with Anna's dark eyes, a tall man with gentle features, and a baby who must have been Anna herself. "That's Mama and Papa, and me when I was Samuel's age," Anna said, tracing the photograph with her fingertip. "Mama said this locket would keep our family together, even if we couldn't all be in the same place." Eli studied the image, seeing the love that bound these people together, the hope in their faces for the future they were building. The woman Rebecca, Anna had called her, had the same determined set to her chin that he saw in her daughter. The same inner strength that had carried Anna through her desperate journey. "She was beautiful," Eli said softly. "You have her eyes." Anna smiled, the first truly carefree expression he had seen from her. "Papa used to say I had her stubborn streak too." Mama would laugh and say that wasn't entirely a compliment. The smile faded as memory brought its inevitable shadow. "I miss them something fierce, Mr. Stoltzfus. Sometimes I wake up and forget they're gone, and then remembering feels like losing them all over again." Eli felt his heart squeeze with recognition. How many mornings had he reached across the bed for Sarah, only to find cold sheets and the crushing return of reality? "Grief is a strange companion," he told Anna. "Some days it feels light as a feather, other days heavy as a millstone. But it's love with no place to go, and that's not something to be ashamed of. Is that how you feel about your Sarah?" Anna asked with a child's directness. "Yes," Eli admitted. "Every day since she passed, I've carried our love around with me, not knowing what to do with it all." Anna closed the locket carefully, holding it against her heart. "Maybe that's why God brought us to your door, Mr. Stoltzfus. Maybe he knew you needed someone to share that love with, and we needed someone to love us back." The simplicity of her faith, the matter-of-fact way she spoke of divine providence, stirred something deep in Eli's chest. Since Sarah's death, his prayers had become mechanical things, duty performed without expectation of answer. But sitting here with this brave child who had walked through fire to save her brother, he felt the first stirrings of something that might, in time, become hope. Their quiet conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses, several of them, judging by the multiple sets of hoofbeats and the creak of wagon wheels. Anna's face went pale, and she clutched the locket tighter, instinctively moving closer to Samuel's basket. "Are they coming for us?" she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Eli rose and looked out the window, recognizing the familiar sight of his neighbor's buggies. "It's the women from the community," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "They've come to help." But even as he spoke the words, Eli felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. He knew these women well, had known them for decades, and while their intentions might be charitable, their visit carried implications he wasn't sure. He was ready to face. The first to reach his door was Hannah Yoder, a woman of 55 years, whose stern demeanor masked a heart that was, if not warm, at least dutiful in its adherence to Christian obligation. Behind her came Martha Byler, Ruth Zook, and Mary King, the unofficial council that governed much of the community's domestic life. "Eli," Hannah said without preamble as he opened the door, "we've come to see about these children Bishop Jacob mentioned. It's not proper for a single man to tend to such things without guidance." The women filed into his kitchen with the authority of those accustomed to managing crises. Their eyes took in every detail, the clean but hastily arranged household, Anna standing protectively beside Samuel's basket, the domestic scene that spoke of lives temporarily intertwined. "Child," Hannah addressed Anna directly, her voice not unkind but carrying the weight of interrogation. "I'm Hannah Yoder. These are my neighbors. We've come to help you and your brother." Anna made the same respectful curtsy she had offered the bishop, but Eli could see the tension in her small frame. "Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Stoltzfus has been very kind to us." Martha Byler, a widow herself, and therefore perhaps more sympathetic to unusual circumstances, knelt beside Samuel's basket. "What a sweet baby," she murmured, her voice genuinely warm. "How old is he?" "3 months, ma'am," Anna replied. "His name is Samuel. And you've been caring for him alone?" Ruth Zook asked, her tone suggesting the impropriety of such a situation. "Yes, ma'am. Since our parents passed." Anna's voice was steady, but Eli could see her hands trembling slightly. Hannah's attention turned to Eli, her expression pointed. "Brother Stoltzfus, while your charity is commendable, surely you understand this situation requires proper handling. A single man caring for children, especially a young girl, it raises questions about propriety, about following established procedures." "The children needed immediate help," Eli replied, his voice carefully controlled. "I provided shelter from the storm. Nothing more, nothing less." "Of course," Hannah said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "But now that the storm has passed, proper arrangements must be made. These children should be placed with a family, a complete family with both mother and father figures." Anna's face went white, and she moved even closer to Samuel's basket. Eli saw her hands clench into fists, saw the way her breath quickened with barely controlled panic. "The girl claims they have family in Philadelphia," Mary King interjected, having heard the story from some unknown source. "Perhaps that would be the best solution, reuniting them with their blood relatives." "Aye." Anna started to speak, then stopped, clearly struggling with the fabrication she had created and the impossibility of maintaining it under closer scrutiny. Martha Byler, watching Anna's distress with compassionate eyes, spoke gently. "Child, are you certain about this uncle in Philadelphia? It's a long way to travel on uncertain hopes." Anna's composure finally cracked, and tears began to slide down her cheeks. I'm not." She looked desperately at Eli, seeking some salvation from the trap her own words had created. Eli stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Anna's shoulder. "The child is frightened and exhausted," he said firmly. "She's been through trauma that would challenge grown adults. Perhaps questions about her future can wait until she's had time to recover." Hannah's expression sharpened. "Eli, I understand your concern, but delay only makes matters more complicated. If these children have no family, then proper authorities must be contacted. There are institutions designed to care for orphans, places where they can receive appropriate education and moral guidance." The word institutions hit Anna like a physical blow. She began to sob, great gasping sounds that seemed to tear from her chest. "Please," she whispered, "please don't separate us. Samuel is all I have left. I won't let them take him away from me." Samuel, disturbed by his sister's distress, began to cry as well, his small voice joining hers in a chorus of fear and desperation. The sound filled Eli's kitchen, echoing off the walls like an accusation against all of them. Martha Byler's face softened with maternal instinct. "Hannah," she said quietly, "perhaps we're moving too quickly. The children are clearly bonded, clearly devoted to each other. Surely there's wisdom in proceeding carefully." "Sentiment cannot override proper procedure," Hannah replied, though her voice had lost some of its certainty. "These children need stable homes, proper education, guidance from families equipped to raise them according to godly principles. And you don't believe I can provide that?" Eli asked, his voice carrying an edge that surprised even him. The women exchanged glances, and in those looks, Eli read years of unspoken concern about his solitary state, his refusal to remarry, his retreat from the full community life that marriage and children represented. "It's not about your capability, Eli," Ruth Zook said carefully. "It's about propriety, about what's best for the children and for the community. A man alone, raising children who aren't his blood, it's simply not done." Anna had gathered Samuel, into her arms and was rocking him gently, her tears falling onto his blanket as she whispered words of comfort in his ear. Watching her, Eli felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced since Sarah's final illness, when he had fought the doctor's pronouncements and death's inexorable approach with every fiber of his being. "What if," he said slowly, the words forming as he spoke them, "what if the community allowed me to care for them temporarily? Just until proper arrangements can be made, until we can be certain they'll be placed somewhere safe and together." Hannah's expression grew stern. "Eli, you're a good man, but this isn't a decision you can make alone. The community has standards, procedures that exist for everyone's protection. What you're suggesting, it would require formal approval, oversight, conditions that ensure propriety is maintained." "Then let me request that approval," Eli said, his voice gaining strength with conviction. "Let me go before the church leaders and formally ask permission to care for these children until their future can be properly determined." The women were quiet for a moment, considering the implications of his request. Such a formal appeal would require community discussion, church meetings, careful consideration of precedent and propriety. "It would be irregular," Martha said thoughtfully, "but not without precedent. The Zimmerman family cared for their nephew after his parents died, and the Stoltzfuses, your own family, Eli, took in that English boy during the war. That was different," Hannah protested. "Those were family members or special circumstances. This is two children who have no one else," Eli interrupted, his voice carrying a firmness that brooked no argument. "Two children who have already suffered loss beyond what anyone should endure. If our faith means anything, if our commitment to caring for the least among us has any substance, then surely we can find a way to keep them safe and together." Anna looked up at him through her tears, and in her eyes, Eli saw something that made his heart clench, hope mixed with terror, gratitude tangled with desperate fear. She was 8 years old and carrying burdens that would challenge the strongest adult, yet she faced each day with courage that humbled him. "I'll speak to Bishop Jacob," Hannah said finally, her tone suggesting this was a significant concession. "If the church leaders agree to consider your request, there would need to be conditioned supervision, regular visits, evidence that the children are receiving proper care and moral instruction." "I understand," Eli said. "I welcome such oversight." As the women prepared to leave, each of them took a final look at Anna and Samuel, seeing perhaps for the first time not just a problem to be solved, but two souls who deserved consideration and care. Martha lingered longest, a widow's heart recognizing something in Eli's devotion that spoke to deeper truths about love and loss, and the courage to open one's heart again. "Eli," she said quietly as the others filed out, "I'll speak in your favor when the time comes. What you're doing, it takes strength to love again after loss. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As their buggies disappeared down the road, Eli closed the door and turned to find Anna watching him with eyes that held both gratitude and questions too complex for her years. "Mr. Stoltzfus," she said softly, "why are you fighting for us? You barely know us." Eli looked at her, this brave child who had walked through a blizzard to save her brother, who faced each challenge with dignity beyond her years, and felt the answer rise from somewhere deep in his heart. "Because Anna," he said simply, "sometimes God puts people in our path not just so we can help them, but so they can help us remember who we're meant to be." The days following the women's visit settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural, despite the uncertainty hanging over their small household. Eli found himself marveling at how quickly Anna adapted to the rhythms of farm life, how eagerly she absorbed the simple lessons he offered about caring for animals and tending the land. That sustained them, but it was Samuel who truly captured his heart. The baby's health had improved dramatically under consistent care and proper feeding, his cheeks filling out and his eyes growing bright with curiosity. Most mornings, Eli would find Anna in the kitchen, Samuel propped in her lap as she fed him. Warm milk, both children bathed in the golden light that streamed through the east window. "You're good with him," Martha Byler observed on a third morning, having arrived with a basket of fresh bread and what Eli suspected was genuine concern rather than the veiled surveillance of her earlier visit. Martha had been widowed 5 years prior and had raised 4 children of her own. Her opinion carried weight in matters of child rearing. "Anna does most of the work," Eli replied, watching as the girl patiently coaxed Samuel to take another spoonful of the porridge she had prepared. "I'd never seen such devotion in one so young." Martha settled beside them at the table, her experienced eyes taking in the domestic scene. "The child has an old soul," she said thoughtfully. "Grief can age a person, but there's wisdom in her. That goes deeper than loss. She was raised with love and careful attention." Anna looked up at the mention of her upbringing, her face brightening with memory. "Mama was a wonderful teacher," she said softly. "She showed me how to tend house, how to cook simple meals, how to care for Samuel when he was first born. She said a woman's hands should always be busy with useful work." "And your father?" Martha asked gently. "What did he teach you?" "Papa taught me to read," Anna replied, pride evident in her voice. "He said education was a gift that no one could take away. That knowledge would serve me well, no matter what life brought. He had books, not many, but good ones. The Bible, some poetry, stories about faraway places." Eli felt a stir of surprise. Education beyond basic literacy was not common in their world, where practical skills and spiritual instruction took precedence over scholarly pursuits. Yet Anna spoke of reading with the same reverence she showed for domestic arts, as if both were equally valuable gifts from loving parents. "Would you like to continue your reading while you're here?" he found himself asking. "I have some books you might enjoy." Anna's eyes widened with delight. "Oh, yes, sir. I would be most grateful. It's been weeks since I've had anything to read except the verses I remember by heart." That afternoon, while Samuel napped peacefully in his basket, Eli introduced Anna to his small library. Most of the books were religious in nature, commentaries on scripture, devotional works, the stories of martyrs who had died for their faith. But there were a few others Sarah had treasured: a volume of poetry, a collection of moral tales for children, even a book of natural history that described the plants and animals of Pennsylvania. Anna approached the books with reverence, running her fingers along their spines as if they were precious jewels. When she selected the poetry volume, Eli felt his throat tighten. It had been Sarah's favorite, the pages soft from countless readings, certain passages marked with her careful notations. "This one belonged to your wife?" Anna asked, sensing the book's significance. "Yes," Eli replied. "She loved the verses about nature, about God's creation. She would read to me in the evenings, especially during the long winter months." Anna opened the book carefully, her eyes scanning the first page. Then, to Eli's amazement, she began to read aloud, her young voice clear and steady as she pronounced each word with careful attention. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." "You read beautifully," Eli said, genuinely impressed. "Your father taught you well." "He said reading aloud was important," Anna explained. "That sharing beautiful words made them more beautiful, like sharing bread made a meal more satisfying." As the days passed, this evening reading became a cherished routine. After supper and evening chores, they would gather by the fire, Anna in Sarah's old rocking chair with Samuel in her lap, Eli in his own chair nearby. Sometimes Anna would read, her young voice breathing new life into familiar passages. Other times, Eli would take the book and read to both children, surprised by how natural it felt to have an audience for the words that had once been shared only between him and Sarah. But it was during the fourth night that disaster struck. Samuel woke in the early hours of the morning with a fever that burned through his small body like wildfire. His cries roused the entire household, and Eli found Anna beside the baby's makeshift cradle, her face white with terror. "He's so hot," she whispered, her hands trembling as she touched Samuel's forehead. Just like when Mama and Papa got sick. "Oh, Mr. Stoltzfus, what if it's the fever? What if I brought it here?" Eli's own heart hammered with fear, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had seen enough illness over the years to know that panic served no one. "Bring him to the kitchen," he instructed. "We'll cool him down and see what we're dealing with." The next few hours passed in a blur of desperate activity. Eli prepared cool baths to bring down Samuel's fever while Anna hovered anxiously, her faith in his competence absolute despite her own terror. The baby's condition was serious but not, Eli judged, immediately life-threatening. Children often ran high fevers for mysterious reasons, their small bodies fighting battles that adults might never understand. "I should have known," Anna whispered, as they worked together, her voice thick with guilt. "I should have seen the signs. What kind of sister am I if I can't even keep him safe?" "You're the kind of sister who walked through a blizzard to save his life," Eli replied firmly. "The kind who has cared for him with more devotion than most adults show their own children. This illness, if it is an illness, is not your fault." By dawn, Samuel's fever had broken, leaving him weak but peaceful, his breathing steady and his color returning to normal. Anna collapsed in the rocking chair beside his cradle, exhaustion finally claiming her as the crisis passed. Eli found himself studying her sleeping face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her small hands remained protectively curled even in sleep. This child had borne burdens that would have broken many adults. Yet she faced each challenge with a courage that humbled him. As he prepared breakfast with unusual care. Soft porridge for Samuel, hearty eggs and bacon for Anna, who would need. Her strength, Eli realized something had shifted during the long night of tending the sick baby. These children were no longer temporary guests in his home. They had become, in some indefinable way, his responsibility, his purpose, his reason for getting up each morning with something approaching joy. The sound of Anna stirring brought him back to the present. She opened her eyes and immediately looked toward Samuel's cradle, relief flooding her face when she saw him sleeping peacefully. "The fever broke," Eli told her gently. "He's going to be fine." Anna's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow this time, but of overwhelming gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for knowing what to do, for staying up all night, for caring about us." Eli felt his own throat tighten with emotion. "Anna," he said softly, "I want you to know something. Whatever the community decides, whatever arrangements need to be made, I won't let anyone separate you from Samuel. That's a promise." Anna studied his face, reading there a sincerity that went deeper than mere words. For the first time since arriving at his door, she allowed herself to truly believe that perhaps, against all odds, they had found not just shelter, but something approaching home. "Mr. Stoltzfus," she said quietly, do you think your Sarah would mind us being here? Using her things, sitting in her chair." Eli looked toward the east window, where morning light was beginning to stream through glass that Sarah had cleaned countless times, illuminating the kitchen she had tended with such care. For the first time since her death, the thought of Sarah brought not just pain, but a complex mixture of grief and gratitude. "I think," he said slowly, "Sarah would be glad her things are being used for their intended purpose again. She always said this house was meant to be filled with the sounds of family." And as if summoned by his words, Samuel stirred in his cradle and offered them his first real smile not the reflexive expression of a sleeping infant, but a genuine, focused smile directed straight at Eli's face. In that moment, as Anna laughed with delight and Samuel cooed his baby pleasure, Eli felt something he had thought was buried forever with Sarah: the simple, profound joy of being needed, of belonging to people who belonged to him in return. The week Bishop Jacob had granted them was drawing to a close, and with it came the weight of decisions that would shape all their futures. Eli had spent sleepless nights wrestling with possibilities, each potential path fraught with complications he couldn't entirely foresee. The children had settled so completely into the rhythm of his household that their absence seemed unimaginable. Yet he knew the community's concerns about propriety and procedure carried legitimate weight. It was on the sixth morning that the sound of multiple horses approaching broke the winter stillness. Eli looked out to see not just Bishop Jacob's familiar buggy, but also a second vehicle, a black carriage bearing the official insignia of the county. His stomach dropped as he recognized the implications. The English authorities had arrived. "Anna," he called softly, not wanting to alarm her unnecessarily, but needing her to understand the gravity of the situation. "Take Samuel upstairs and stay there until I call for you." Anna appeared in the kitchen doorway, Samuel in her arms, her face immediately registering the tension in Eli's voice. She had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense danger, a survival instinct honed by weeks of uncertainty and loss. "Is it the authorities?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear he could see in her eyes. "Yes," Eli replied honestly. "But remember what I promised you. Whatever happens, I won't let them separate you from Samuel." Anna nodded and disappeared up the stairs, though Eli could hear her footsteps as she positioned herself where she could listen to what transpired below. The child's courage in the face of such uncertainty continued to amaze him. Bishop Jacob emerged from his buggy first, his expression grave as he approached the house. Behind him came a man Eli didn't recognize, tall, thin, wearing the dark suit and official bearing of government bureaucracy. This would be the county official who held the power to determine the children's fate with a stroke of his pen. "Eli," the bishop said without preamble as they entered his kitchen, "this is Mr. Thaddeus Thompson from the County Children's Services. He's come to interview the children and assess their situation." Mr. Thompson was a man of perhaps 50 years, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to take inventory of everything they saw. He carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions about other people's lives. Yet there was something in his manner that suggested genuine concern for the welfare of children rather than mere bureaucratic efficiency. "Mr. Stoltzfus," Thompson said, extending his hand, "I understand you've been caring for 2 orphaned children. I'm here to determine what arrangements would best serve their interests." Eli shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. "The children are upstairs," he said. "Anna the girl is very protective of her baby brother. They've been through considerable trauma." "So I understand," Thompson replied, settling into the chair Eli offered. "Bishop Lapp has briefed me on their situation. A sad case, indeed. But children in such circumstances require proper placement, adequate resources, and appropriate supervision. I'm sure you understand." The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. A single Amish farmer, however well-intentioned, might not be considered suitable for raising 2 orphaned English children according to county standards. "Before we speak with the children," Bishop Jacob interjected, "there are matters we should discuss privately. Eli has formally requested permission to care for these children temporarily until permanent arrangements can be made." Thompson's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's irregular, but not unprecedented. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Stoltzfus?" Eli had rehearsed this conversation countless times, but actually speaking the words aloud felt momentous. "I'm asking for formal custody of Anna and Samuel Morrison with the community's oversight and support." I have the means to provide for them, the desire to care for them, and the commitment to raise them according to proper moral principles. You're unmarried, Thompson observed, his tone neutral but pointed. I am. My wife passed away 3 years ago, but the children need stability, and they've already formed attachments here. Anna is terrified of being placed in an institution, and she's determined not to be separated from her brother. Thompson made notes in a small leather portfolio, his pen scratching across the paper with official finality. I'll need to interview the children directly. The girls' preferences will be taken into consideration, though ultimately the decision must be based on what serves their best interests. Of course, Eli agreed, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Anna is remarkably mature for her age and very articulate. I think you'll find her quite capable of expressing her wishes. Bishop Jacob cleared his throat, and Eli heard in. That sounded the weight of community judgment. There would need to be conditions, the bishop said carefully. Regular oversight, evidence of proper moral instruction, assurance that the children are receiving appropriate education and socialization. I welcome such conditions, Eli replied, meaning it. I want what's best for Anna and Samuel, not just what's convenient for me. Thompson studied him for a long moment, perhaps reading something in his face that spoke to his sincerity. Mr. Stoltzfus, I've seen many people request custody of children for various reasons, some admirable, some less so. What is it about these particular children that makes you willing to take on such responsibility? The question struck deeper than Eli had expected. He thought of Anna's courage during her desperate journey, of Samuel's trusting smile, of the way their presence had awakened something in his heart he thought was dead forever. I think, he said slowly, they need someone to fight for them, and I need someone to fight for. My wife and I, we always hoped for children, but were never blessed that way. When Anna appeared at my door with Samuel in her arms, it felt like an answer to prayers. I'd stopped praying. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to speak with the girl now, if you please. Eli called up the stairs, and Anna appeared moments later with Samuel in her arms. She had changed into her cleanest dress and braided her hair with careful attention, presenting herself with all the dignity her 8 years could muster. Samuel, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, babbled contentedly and reached for the light streaming through the kitchen window. Good afternoon, Anna, Thompson said gently, his official demeanor softening in the presence of a child. I'm Mr. Thompson from the county. I'm here to make sure you and your brother are being properly cared for. Anna made her small curtsy, then settled into the chair across from him with Samuel on her lap. Good afternoon, sir. Mr. Stoltzfus has been very kind to us. Samuel's much stronger now than when we arrived. Thompson spent the next hour questioning Anna with surprising gentleness, asking about her journey, her parents' death, her hopes for the future. Anna answered each question with remarkable composure, never wavering in her determination to keep Samuel with her, never suggesting anything but gratitude for Eli's care. Anna, Thompson said finally, there are institutions designed specifically to care for children in your situation. Places where you would receive education, proper medical care, and preparation for adult life. Would you consider such placement if it meant you and Samuel could stay together? Anna's face went white, but her voice remained steady. Sir, I've heard about such places. I know they mean well, but Samuel and I, we're not just brother and sister. I'm the only mother he's ever known, and he's all the family I have left. We need each other, and we need someone who understands that we belong together no matter what. And you believe Mr. Stoltzfus understands that? Anna looked directly at Eli, and in her eyes he saw trust so complete it took his breath away. Yes, sir. He promised me he wouldn't let anyone separate us, and I believe him. More than that, though I think we help him too. His house was very quiet and sad before we came. Now it feels like a home again. Thompson made more notes, his expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, He closed his portfolio and looked around the kitchen, taking in the signs of careful domestic life. The evidence of children who were clean, fed, and obviously cherished. "Mr. Stoltzfus," he said finally, "I'm prepared to recommend temporary custody with certain conditions. There would be a 6-month probationary period with regular inspections. The children would need to receive proper education. The girl should be enrolled in school, and both children should have regular medical examinations. You would need to demonstrate that you can provide not just basic care, but a stable, nurturing environment that prepares them for productive adult lives." Eli felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. "I accept those conditions gladly. The final decision rests with the court," Thompson continued, "but my recommendation will carry significant weight. Bishop Lapp has assured me that the community will provide oversight and support, which addresses many of my concerns about a single guardian." As the officials prepared to leave, Anna remained seated with Samuel, her composure finally cracking as the magnitude of what had just transpired began to sink in. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, not tears of sorrow this time, but of overwhelming relief. "Mr. Stoltzfus," she whispered after the door closed behind their visitors, "does this mean we can stay? Does this mean Samuel and I can finally stop running?" Eli knelt beside her chair, reaching out to touch Samuel's tiny hand. The baby grasped his finger with surprising strength, holding on as if he understood the significance of the moment. "It means," Eli said softly, "that we're going to fight for each other, all three of us, together." Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside Eli's kitchen, surrounded by the warmth of a fire and the promise of a future none of them had dared to hope for, Anna finally allowed herself to believe that perhaps their long journey toward home was nearly over. The formal custody hearing was scheduled for the following week, but the intervening days brought an unexpected gift: the gradual acceptance of several community members who had initially questioned Eli's decision. Martha Byler proved to be his most stalwart ally, arriving each morning with fresh bread and practical assistance, her presence lending legitimacy to the domestic arrangements that some still viewed with suspicion. It was Martha who first suggested consulting the English legal system more thoroughly, understanding that Eli's request went beyond simple community approval into the complex realm of state law. Together, they made the journey to Lancaster, where a lawyer named Samuel Garrett, a man known for his fair dealings with the Amish community, agreed to help navigate the legal requirements. "The precedent exists," Garrett explained during their consultation, his office lined with law books and official documents that spoke of English complexity far removed from Amish simplicity. "Pennsylvania recognizes the placement of orphaned children with suitable guardians, even unmarried ones, provided certain conditions are met. The challenge will be demonstrating that you can provide not just material care, but the emotional and educational support these children require." Eli listened carefully, taking notes in his careful script while Martha asked practical questions about timelines and procedures. The lawyer's guidance was invaluable, but it also underscored the magnitude of what Eli was attempting, permanently altering his life to accommodate 2 children whose future depended entirely on his commitment. That evening, as Anna helped prepare supper while Samuel played contentedly in his basket, Eli found himself studying the scene with new eyes. The domesticity that had developed so naturally between them might appear seamless to casual observers, but he understood now that official scrutiny would examine every detail of their arrangement. "Anna," he said as they sat down to eat, "there's something I need to share with you." Anna's face immediately grew serious, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. After weeks of uncertainty, she had learned to read the subtleties of adult concern. "The latter told us that if the court approves our arrangement, there will be questions about my family, about where I came from, and how I became part of the Amish community," Eli continued gently. "I want you to understand something about my own history, something that might help you feel less alone in this process. Anna set down her fork entirely, giving him her complete attention in the way that marked her as genuinely mature beyond her years. I was adopted too, Eli said, the words feeling strange after decades of rarely speaking them aloud. When I was just a baby, not much older than Samuel is now. My birth parents died in an accident, and the Stoltzfus family took me in, raised me as their own son. Anna's eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been hope. You were an orphan like us? I was. Jacob and Mary Stoltzfus had 3 children of their own, but they saw a baby who needed love and family, and they opened their hearts. They never made me feel different or less than their biological children. I grew up Amish, married Sarah within the community, became a full member of the church. My adoption was never a barrier to belonging. Did you always know? Anna asked quietly. Yes, they told me from the beginning. They said it was important. I understand that I was chosen, that they didn't have to love me, but they did, completely and forever. Anna was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this revelation. Then she reached across the table and touched his hand, a gesture both childlike and profound. Is that why you understand us so well? She asked. Why you're not afraid to take us in? Eli felt his throat tighten with emotion. Perhaps. I know what it means to belong somewhere, not because of blood, but because of love. I know how precious that gift is, and how important it is to preserve it. The conversation was interrupted by Samuel's fussing, and Anna immediately rose to tend to him. But Eli could see that his words had planted seeds of understanding that would continue to grow. Later that evening, after Anna had settled Samuel for the night, she appeared at Eli's study door carrying something in her hands, his family Bible, its leather binding worn smooth by generations of use. Mr. Stoltzfus, she said hesitantly, would you show me where your name is written? In the family records? Eli opened the Bible to the pages where births, marriages, and deaths were recorded in careful script. His finger traced down to his own. Entry: Eli Stoltzfus, adopted into the family of Jacob and Mary Stoltzfus, on March 15, 1852. Beloved son and brother. Anna studied the entry with fascination, then looked at the blank spaces below it. There's room for more names, she observed. Yes, Eli agreed, understanding her unspoken question. If our arrangement becomes permanent, if you and Samuel truly become part of this family, your names would be recorded here too. Anna traced the empty lines with her fingertip, her expression thoughtful. What would it say about us? Eli considered the question carefully, understanding that his answer carried weight beyond mere words. It would say that Anna Morrison and Samuel Morrison became beloved children of Eli Stoltzfus and cherished members of the Stoltzfus family. Even though we're not Amish? Anna asked. The community would expect you to learn our ways, to respect our beliefs and customs. But belonging isn't about where you were born or how you were raised initially. It's about choosing to be part of something larger than yourself, about accepting the love and responsibility that comes with family. Anna nodded slowly, then surprised him by asking, could you teach me about being Amish? I want to understand your world properly, not just live in it. Over the following days, Eli began Anna's informal education in Amish customs and beliefs. She learned simple German phrases, helped Martha with traditional cooking methods, observed the quiet rhythms of community worship and mutual support. Her eager questions and respectful attention impressed even some of the more skeptical neighbors. Samuel, meanwhile, continued to thrive under consistent care. His health had fully recovered from the fever, and he was reaching the developmental milestones that marked a baby progressing normally. More importantly, he had formed a clear attachment to Eli, lighting up whenever the man entered his field of vision. Reaching for him with obvious trust and affection, it was Martha who first pointed out the obvious truth that Eli had been too close to the situation to recognize fully. "You're a natural father," she told him one afternoon as they watched Anna teach Samuel to clap his hands together. "Some men struggle with the instincts required for child-rearing, but you've taken to it as if you were born for it." "I had good teachers," Eli replied, thinking of his adoptive parents and the love they had shown him. "And these children make it easy to love them." "That's true," Martha agreed. "But love alone isn't enough. You've provided structure, patience, guidance, all the things that help children feel secure and valued. Sarah would be proud of the man you've become and the father you're proving to be." The words touched something deep in Eli's heart. Since Sarah's death, he'd often wondered if he was living up to the man she had believed him to be. Caring for Anna and Samuel, watching them flourish under his protection, felt like a restoration of purpose he had thought was lost forever. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Anna made an observation that crystallized everything Eli had been feeling, but hadn't known how to express. "Mr. Stoltzfus," she said, as he tucked Samuel into his makeshift cradle, "I think Samuel's first word is going to be Papa." Eli paused in his gentle ministrations, looking down at the baby who had become so precious to him. Samuel gazed back with bright, trusting eyes, and Eli felt his heart expand with a love so profound it nearly took his breath away. "Would that be all right with you?" he asked Anna softly. Anna smiled, the same radiant expression that had so captivated him the night she first felt truly safe in his home. "I think," she said, "our parents would want us to call the person who saved us exactly what he is to us now." As Eli extinguished the lamps and checked the locks one final time, he reflected on the transformation that had taken place in his household. What had begun as a simple act of charity had become something infinitely more complex and meaningful. The creation of a family bound not by blood but by choice, not by obligation, but by love freely given and gratefully received. Tomorrow would bring the custody hearing and all its attendant uncertainties, but tonight, as snow fell softly outside and his children slept peacefully upstairs, Eli felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years, the quiet satisfaction of a man who knew his purpose and was living it fully. The evening before the custody hearing, Eli sat with Anna by the fireplace, the family Bible open between them, as he showed her again where her name might one day be written. The weight of tomorrow's proceedings hung heavy in the air, but there was also a sense of cautious hope. They had done everything possible to prepare, and the community's gradual acceptance had strengthened their case considerably. Anna was unusually quiet, turning her mother's locket over and over in her small hands, a nervous habit she had developed when deep in thought. Samuel slept peacefully in his basket nearby, his breathing steady and sweet, unaware that his entire future would be decided within the next 24 hours. "Mr. Stoltzfus," Anna said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "may I ask you something about the locket? Something I've never told anyone." Eli looked up from the Bible, noting the serious expression on her face. Over the weeks they had been together, he had learned to recognize when Anna was wrestling with something significant. Her mature composure would crack slightly, revealing the frightened child beneath. "Of course, Anna. You can ask me anything." Anna opened the locket with careful fingers, revealing the familiar photograph of her family that she had shown him before. But this time, instead of simply looking at the image, she pressed something tiny that Eli had never noticed. A small catch hidden in the locket's frame. To his amazement, the photograph slid aside, revealing a second, smaller picture hidden beneath. Anna lifted it out with trembling hands and held it up to the firelight. Eli's world tilted. The photograph showed a young woman in Amish dress, plain bonnet, simple cape and apron, the distinctive style of their community. But it was her face that stopped Eli's breath entirely. The woman in the hidden photograph had Anna's dark eyes, Anna's determined chin, Anna's exact features, but aged to perhaps 18 or 19 years. "My mama when she was young," Anna said softly, watching Eli's face with careful attention. She hid this picture behind the family portrait. I found it by accident when I was very small, playing with the locket while she was cooking. When I asked her about it, she got very sad and told me never to speak of it to anyone, especially not to Papa. Eli's hand shook as he took the photograph, holding it closer to the light. The woman's face was hauntingly familiar, stirring memories he couldn't quite grasp. The Amish dress, the setting that looked remarkably like their own church district, the features that seemed to echo something important just beyond his recollection. "Anna," he said carefully, his voice tight with sudden realization. "What was?" "Your mother's full name?" "Rebecca Morrison," Anna replied. "But I think her name before she married Papa was different." Sometimes when she thought I wasn't listening, she would whisper to herself in words that sounded like the German you and Bishop Jacob speak. Eli's heart began to pound. Rebecca, a young woman named Rebecca, who had left their community years ago under circumstances that had caused great sorrow within families, great division within the church. He remembered now Sarah's younger sister, Rebecca Lapp, who had fallen in love with an English boy when she was barely 18. "Anna," he said, his voice barely functioning, "your mother's maiden name, do you remember it at all?" Anna's brow furrowed in concentration. I think it was Lapp, Rebecca Lapp. Papa sometimes called her Becca when he was being tender, but her full name was Rebecca Lapp Morrison." The photograph slipped from Eli's nerveless fingers. Rebecca Lapp, Sarah's beloved younger sister, who had been shunned by the community for marrying outside the faith. Sarah's sister, who had left their district 20 years ago, breaking Sarah's heart and leaving a wound that never fully healed. Eli rose from his chair so suddenly that Anna startled. He moved to the mantel where Sarah's own wedding photograph stood in its simple frame, taking it down with hands that trembled with shock and recognition. Side by side, the resemblance was unmistakable. Sarah and Rebecca shared the same eyes, the same gentle slope of nose, the same stubborn set to their mouths that spoke of women who knew their own minds. "Mr. Stoltzfus?" Anna's voice was small, frightened by the intensity of his reaction. "What's wrong? Do you know something about my mama?" Eli sank back into his chair, still holding Sarah's photograph. The magnitude of what he had just discovered crashed over him like a wave, recontextualizing everything. Anna's arrival at his door, the way she had reminded him so strongly of Sarah from the very beginning, the sense of divine providence that had surrounded their entire situation. "Anna," he said slowly, trying to process the implications even as he spoke, "your mother was my wife's sister." Anna's eyes went wide with shock. "What?" Rebecca Lapp was Sarah's younger sister. They were very close when Rebecca was young, but when Rebecca chose to marry your father, an Englishman, the community rules required that she be shunned. She had to choose between her family and her love for your father. Anna's face went pale as the meaning of his words sank in. You mean Mama had a sister? And that sister was your Sarah?" "Yes." Eli's voice was thick with emotion. Sarah grieved for Rebecca every day after she left. She wasn't allowed to contact her, wasn't permitted to know what had become of her. It broke Sarah's heart, never knowing if Rebecca was safe, if she was happy, if she ever regretted her choice. Anna stared at the photographs, her mother in Amish dress, Sarah in her wedding portrait, seeing the family resemblance that was now so obvious. That means your family. Real family. You're our uncle." The word hit Eli like a physical blow. Uncle. Not just a kind stranger who had taken them in, but actual family, connected by blood and love and the invisible threads that bind generations together. "Anna," he whispered, understanding flooding through him, "your arrival here wasn't chance. It wasn't coincidence. You didn't just happen upon my door in the storm." Anna was crying now, great tears that seemed to wash away weeks of uncertainty and fear. Mama always said God had a plan, that even when things seemed darkest, He was working everything together for good. But I never imagined, I never dreamed. Eli pulled her into his arms. This brave child, who was his wife's niece, this precious girl who carried Sarah's blood in her veins. Samuel stirred in his basket, perhaps sensing the emotional intensity in the room, and Eli reached for him too, gathering both children close. Sarah prayed for Rebecca every night, he told Anna through his own tears. Every single night for 20 years, she prayed that God would keep her sister safe, that somehow they might be reunited. She never stopped loving her, never stopped. Hoping. Do you think she would have wanted us here? Anna asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Eli thought of Sarah's unfinished baby quilt, of her dreams of children, of the way she had spoken Rebecca's name in her prayers, even when it caused her pain to remember. Anna, I think Sarah's prayers brought you here. I think she's been guiding you home to family all along. As they held each other in the firelight, Samuel content in the circle of their arms, Eli felt a peace he hadn't known since Sarah's death. The children weren't just orphans he had chosen to help. They were Sarah's legacy, her sister's children, family in the truest and most profound sense. Tomorrow, he said softly, when we go before the judge, we'll tell them the truth. You're not just children in need of a guardian. You're my family, coming home where you belong. Anna lifted her head to look at him, her eyes bright with tears and hope. Uncle Eli? She said tentatively, testing the words. Yes, he replied, his heart full to overflowing. Uncle Eli, and you're my nieces and nephew, Sarah's sister's children, exactly where God intended you to be. Outside, the wind howled around the farmhouse, but inside, surrounded by the warmth of family love and divine providence, Anna finally allowed herself to believe that their long journey through the wilderness was truly over. They had found more than shelter. They had found home and family, and the fulfillment of prayers spoken by a woman who had never stopped believing that love could overcome any distance, any separation, any barrier that circumstances might create. As they prepared for bed, Anna carefully placed both photographs, her mother in Amish dress and Sarah in her wedding portrait, side by side on the mantel. Two sisters, separated by choices and circumstances, now reunited through the children who carried their love forward into the next generation. Thank you, Aunt Sarah, Anna whispered to the photograph. Thank you for bringing us home. The dawn of the custody hearing arrived gray and solemn, with ice crystals coating the windows in patterns that caught the early light like fragments of prayer. Eli had barely slept, his mind racing with the implications of Anna's revelation and the strategy they would need for the day ahead. The discovery that Anna and Samuel were Sarah's sister's children had transformed everything. What had been an act of charity was now a family reunion spanning 2 decades of separation and loss. Anna appeared at breakfast, dressed in her best clothes, her hair braided with meticulous care, carrying herself with the dignity that never failed to impress him. She had hidden her mother's locket beneath her dress, but Eli could see the small outline against her chest, a talisman of family connection that would give her strength through the day's trials. Uncle Eli, she said softly, still testing the word that had changed their entire relationship overnight. Are you certain we should tell them about Mama being Aunt Sarah's sister? Will it help our case or make things more complicated? It was a mature question that showed Anna's growing understanding of the complex social and legal forces that would determine their future. Eli had wrestled with the same concerns through the sleepless hours of the night, but his conclusion had solidified with the morning light. Anna, he said, settling beside her at the kitchen table, the truth is power that lies cannot match. When we tell the court that you and Samuel are my family, not just children I've chosen to help, but my wife's sister's children, it changes everything about our request. It makes our desire to stay together not just charitable but natural, not just legal, but right. Samuel, oblivious to the day's significance, babbled happily in his high chair, reaching for the pieces of soft bread Anna had prepared for his breakfast. His development over the past weeks had been remarkable. He was sitting steadily now, his eyes bright with intelligence, his attachment to both Anna and Eli unmistakable to anyone who observed them together. But what if they asked questions about why Mama left the Amish community? Anna persisted. What if they think badly of her for choosing Papa over her family? Eli had considered this concern as well, understanding that the circumstances of Rebecca's departure might be viewed negatively by English authorities who didn't fully understand Amish customs regarding shunning and forgiveness. Then we'll explain that your mother chose love, he said simply, that she followed her heart even when it meant sacrifice, and that the family she created with your father was built on the same values of devotion and commitment that guide our community. We'll make them understand that bringing you and Samuel into our family honors both your parents' memory and your aunt's prayers. Martha Byler arrived just as they were finishing breakfast, carrying Sarah's prayer journal, a small, leather-bound notebook that Eli had forgotten existed until Martha reminded him the previous evening. Sarah had kept a daily record of her prayers and spiritual reflections, and Martha had remembered that many entries concerned Rebecca and the hope for eventual reconciliation. I thought this might be helpful today, Martha said, settling the journal on the kitchen table with reverent care. Sarah's prayers for her sister are written here in her own hand year after year. It shows that she never stopped loving Rebecca, never stopped hoping for healing between them. Eli opened the journal carefully, its pages soft with age and frequent handling. Sarah's neat script filled every page, documenting her spiritual journey. Through their marriage, her struggles with childlessness, her unwavering hope that God would somehow restore what had been lost. Page after page contained variations of the same prayer. Lord, keep my sister Rebecca safe. Bring her home to us when the time is right. Let love triumph over division. May I see? Anna asked quietly, and Eli turned the journal toward her so she could read Sarah's words. Anna's eyes filled with tears as she traced her aunt's careful script, understanding for the first time the depth of love that had persisted despite years of enforced separation. She never stopped praying for Mama, Anna whispered. Even when she wasn't allowed to contact her, even when she didn't know if Mama was alive or dead. That's the kind of love that runs in your family, Martha observed, her voice warm with understanding. The kind that endures beyond circumstances, beyond rules, beyond everything except death itself, and maybe even beyond that. As they prepared to leave for the courthouse, Anna made one final request that surprised Eli with its thoughtfulness. Uncle Eli, she said, may I bring Aunt Sarah's quilting hoop to court with us? I know it might seem strange, but I feel like she should be there somehow, to see her family reunited. Eli's throat tightened with emotion. The quilting hoop had sat untouched in his bedroom for 3 years. Sarah's unfinished baby quilt stretched across its frame like a promise waiting for fulfillment. The idea of bringing it to court seemed both unconventional and perfectly appropriate. Yes, he said simply. I think Sarah would want to be part of this day. The courthouse in Lancaster was an imposing brick building that spoke of English authority and legal complexity far removed from the simple governance of Amish community life. As they climbed the steps, Eli carrying Samuel, Anna clutching the quilting hoop, Martha providing moral support, Eli felt the weight of all the prayers and hopes that had led to this moment. Bishop Jacob met them in the courthouse lobby, his presence lending both moral support and community endorsement to their cause. He had brought with him several other church leaders who would testify to Eli's character and the community's willingness to support the family arrangement. How are you feeling, child? The bishop asked Anna gently, noting her pale complexion but steady demeanor. Ready to tell the truth, Anna replied with quiet dignity. Ready to come home to family. The courtroom itself was smaller than Eli had expected, but no less intimidating, with its dark wood paneling and formal arrangement of tables and chairs. Judge Harrison, a man of perhaps 60 years, with gray hair and kind eyes, presided from behind an elevated bench that symbolized the authority of English law. Mr. Thompson, the county official who had become their unexpected advocate, presented the case with thoroughness and compassion. He detailed the children's circumstances, Eli's exemplary care, and the community's support for the arrangement. But it was when Anna took the witness stand that the proceedings truly came alive. Anna, Judge Harrison said gently, I understand you have something important to tell the court about your family connections. Anna straightened in the witness chair, her small hands folded in her lap with perfect composure. Yes, Your Honor. Yesterday, we discovered that my mother was Uncle Eli's wife's sister. Mama's name before she married Papa was Rebecca Lapp, and she was the sister of Sarah Stoltzfus, who was Uncle Eli's wife. A murmur of interest rippled through the courtroom. Judge Harrison leaned forward, clearly intrigued by this development. Can you explain to the court how this discovery was made? The judge asked. Anna reached into her dress and withdrew her mother's locket, opening it with careful fingers to reveal both photographs, her family portrait and the hidden image of her mother in Amish dress. Mama hid this picture in her locket. Anna explained. When I showed it to Uncle Eli, he recognized her as his wife's sister who had left the community many years ago. The photographs were entered as evidence and passed to the judge, who studied them with growing understanding. The family resemblance between Rebecca and Sarah was unmistakable, lending credibility to Anna's testimony that went beyond mere words. Anna, Judge Harrison continued, knowing what you now know about your family connections, can you tell the court what you hope will happen today? Anna's voice remained steady, but Eli could see the emotion flickering in her eyes. Your Honor, Samuel, and I have been orphans for months, with no family and no home. But we're not really orphans. We have Uncle Eli, who's our family by blood and by love. We belong with him, not because he's willing to take us in, but because we're his family and he's ours. And you believe this arrangement would serve your best interests and those of your baby brother? Yes, Your Honor. Uncle Eli has cared for us with love and devotion since the moment we appeared at his door. He's taught me about my mama's family, about the faith and community that shaped her before she chose to leave. Samuel has thrived under his care, and we've both found not just safety but belonging. We're not asking for charity, we're asking to come home to family. As Anna stepped down from the witness stand, Eli felt a pride so profound it nearly overwhelmed him. This brave child, his niece, Sarah's sister's daughter, had presented their case with eloquence and dignity that would have impressed attorneys. Twice her age, the final testimony came from Bishop Jacob, who spoke movingly about the power of family bonds to transcend circumstances, about the community's recognition that sometimes God's plan includes reunions that heal old wounds and restore what seemed lost forever. Your Honor, the bishop concluded, what we witness today is not just a custody arrangement, but a family restoration. These children belong with Eli Stoltzfus, not just legally, but spiritually, not just practically, but providentially. To deny this connection would be to ignore the very foundations of family love that both our communities, Amish and English, hold sacred. As the proceedings concluded and Judge Harrison retired to consider his decision, Anna reached for Eli's hand, her small fingers intertwining with his larger ones. Whatever happens, she whispered, I'm grateful we found each other. I'm grateful Aunt Sarah's prayers were answered, even if it took 20 years. Eli squeezed her hand gently, looking down at Samuel sleeping peacefully in his arms despite the courtroom's formal atmosphere. Anna, he said softly, I believe we're about to discover that some prayers are worth waiting for, that some reunions are worth every moment of separation that preceded them. Outside the courthouse windows, snow began to fall again, but inside, surrounded by family and community and the promise of legal recognition, they waited for the words that would finally, officially, bring Sarah's sister's children home where they belonged. Judge Harrison returned to the courtroom after what felt like an eternity, but had been only 30 minutes by the clock on the wall. His expression was thoughtful but unreadable as he settled behind the bench. The custody papers that would determine their future spread before him like the final pages of a story that had been 20 years in the writing. Eli felt Anna's hand tighten in his as they rose for the judge's entrance. Samuel stirred in his arms but didn't wake, his small body warm and trusting against Eli's chest. Around them, the courtroom held its breath. Bishop Jacob and the church leaders, Martha with her steady presence, Mr. Thompson with his careful notes, all waiting for words that would either unite a family or tear it apart according to the impersonal machinery of legal procedure. "Please be seated," Judge Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of decision. He looked out over the courtroom, his eyes settling on Anna and Eli with an expression that seemed to acknowledge the magnitude of what he was about to pronounce. "In my 23 years on this bench," the judge began, "I have heard many custody cases, each with its own complexities and challenges. But I have rarely encountered a situation that so clearly demonstrates the mysterious ways in which families can be restored, wounds can be healed, and prayers can be answered across decades of separation." Anna's breath caught audibly. Eli could feel his own heart hammering against his ribs as the judge continued. "The evidence presented today tells a remarkable story. 2 children, orphaned by tragedy, undertake a desperate journey through winter storms to seek safety. By what can only be described as providence, they arrive at the door of a man who, unknown to them, is their uncle by marriage, the widower of their mother's estranged sister." Judge Harrison lifted the photographs that had been entered as evidence. Rebecca, in her Amish dress, the family portrait, Sarah's wedding picture. The physical evidence of family connection is compelling. But more compelling still is the evidence of love, care, and belonging that these children have found in Mr. Stoltzfus's home. The judge's attention turned to Anna, and his stern judicial demeanor softened slightly. "Young lady, your testimony today was remarkable, not just for its clarity, but for its wisdom. You spoke of belonging not just as a legal concept, but as a fundamental human need. You articulated better than many adults the difference between charity and family love." Anna straightened in her chair, her composure holding despite the tears that had begun to slide silently down her cheeks. "Mr. Stoltzfus," Judge Harrison continued, addressing Eli directly, "the court has reviewed the reports of Mr. Thompson, the testimonies of community leaders, and the evidence of your care for these children. Your transformation from solitary widower to devoted guardian has been documented and witnessed by multiple credible sources." Eli held his breath, Samuel's weight in his arms feeling simultaneously heavy and precious, like holding the future itself. "The law requires that I consider the best interests of the children above all other factors," the judge said, his voice growing more formal as he approached his decision. "I must weigh stability against uncertainty, establish procedure against exceptional circumstances, legal precedent against the unique nature of family bonds." The courthouse was so quiet that Eli could hear the whisper of snow against the windows, the soft sound of Anna's careful breathing, the rustle of papers as the judge organized his thoughts. Having considered all the evidence and testimony presented, Judge Harrison said, his voice gaining strength and certainty, "I find that the best interests of Anna Morrison and Samuel Morrison are clearly served by placement with their uncle, Eli Stoltzfus." Anna gasped, a sound of pure joy that seemed to fill the entire courtroom. Eli felt his knees nearly buckle with relief, his arms tightening protectively around Samuel, who chose that moment to wake and look around with bright, curious eyes. "However," the judge continued, raising his hand to indicate he wasn't finished. This placement comes with specific conditions that must be met to ensure the children's continued welfare and proper development. The word, however, sent a chill through Eli's relief, reminding him that even victory in such matters came with obligations and oversight that could shape their family life for years to come. First, the children must receive regular medical care and educational instruction appropriate to their ages and abilities. Second, Mr. Stoltzfus must submit to quarterly inspections by county social services to ensure continued stability and proper care. Third, any significant changes in living arrangements, educational plans, or family circumstances must be reported to and approved by this court. Eli nodded his understanding, each condition seeming reasonable and manageable compared to the alternative of losing the children altogether. Finally, Judge Harrison said, his voice taking on a more personal tone, I want to address the broader implications of this case. What we have witnessed here today is not just a legal proceeding, but a demonstration of how love can transcend time, distance, and even death itself. Mrs. Sarah Stoltzfus's prayers for her sister have been answered through these children's arrival in their uncle's home. This family has been restored not by human planning, but by forces that exceed our understanding. The judge looked directly at Anna, his expression warm with something approaching grandfatherly affection. Young lady, you spoke earlier about coming home to family. It is my privilege to make that homecoming official. As he prepared to pronounce the final words that would legally seal their family bond, Samuel chose that moment to reach toward the judge and babble what sounded remarkably like Papa, his tiny voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom. The sound broke the formal tension entirely, and Judge Harrison smiled, the first genuinely warm expression Eli had seen from him throughout the proceedings. Therefore, Judge Harrison said, his voice now carrying the full weight of legal authority mixed with unmistakable warmth, by the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I hereby grant permanent custody of Anna Morrison and Samuel Morrison to their uncle, Eli Stoltzfus, with all the rights and responsibilities that such guardianship entails. The gavel came down with a decisive crack that seemed to echo through the courtroom and into Eli's very soul. Anna burst into tears, not of sorrow this time, but of overwhelming relief and joy that had been too long deferred. She launched herself from her chair and into Eli's free arm, burying her face against his shoulder as months of fear and uncertainty finally released their hold on her heart. It's official, she sobbed against his coat. We're really family now. We're really home. Samuel, perhaps sensing the emotional intensity around him, began to clap his tiny hands together, a skill Anna had been teaching him, as if he understood that this was a moment for celebration. His bright laughter filled the courtroom, a sound of pure innocence and joy that brought smiles to even the most formal faces present. Bishop Jacob approached them with tears in his own eyes, his stern demeanor softened by the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Eli, he said quietly, I believe we have been privileged to see God's hand at work in ways that exceed our understanding. Welcome to your children officially and permanently. The words your children hit Eli with fresh impact. No longer were Anna and Samuel temporary guests, charity cases, or even beloved wards. They were his children, legally and permanently, with all the joy and responsibility that such a designation carried. Martha Byler was next to offer congratulations, her practical nature already moving toward the details that would shape their new life. There will be paperwork to complete, she told Eli, arrangements to make for Anna's schooling, decisions about how to integrate them fully into community life. But those are good problems to have, the problems of a family planning its future together. Mr. Thompson approached with his official documents, his normally bureaucratic demeanor replaced by something approaching personal satisfaction. Mr. Stoltzfus, he said, extending his hand. In 30 years of child welfare work, I have rarely seen a case that so clearly demonstrated the power of family love to overcome seemingly impossible circumstances. These children are fortunate to have found you, and I believe you are equally fortunate to have found them. As they gathered their belongings to leave the courthouse, Anna carefully tucked her mother's locket back beneath her dress, but not before opening it one final time to look at the hidden photograph that had changed everything. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered to the image. "Thank you for leading us home to family." Outside the courthouse, snow was falling more heavily, coating the steps and sidewalks with a fresh blanket of white that seemed to promise new beginnings. Eli stood for a moment in the cold air, Anna at his side and Samuel in his arms, marveling at how completely his life had been transformed by a desperate knock on his door during a winter storm. "Uncle Eli," Anna said, tugging on his coat sleeve, "may we go home now? I want to write our names in the family Bible officially this time." The word home carried new weight now, new permanence. Not just the place where they had found temporary shelter, but the place where they belonged, where their names would be recorded in careful script alongside generations of Stoltzfus family members who had chosen love over ease, family over solitude, faith over fear. As they climbed into Bishop Jacob's buggy for the ride back to the farm, Anna settled beside Eli with Samuel in her lap, all three of them wrapped in warm blankets against the winter cold. The familiar rhythm of horses' hooves on frozen ground carried them through the Pennsylvania countryside toward the place that was no longer just Eli's house but their family home. "I want to finish Aunt Sarah's quilt," Anna announced suddenly, her voice filled with new purpose. "I want to learn how to use her quilting hoop properly, how to make the stitches small and even like hers. It should be completed by someone in the family." Eli felt his throat tighten with emotion. Sarah's unfinished baby quilt, which had sat untouched for 3 years as a monument to dreams deferred, would finally serve its intended purpose, welcoming children into the family, celebrating the love that creates and sustains family bonds across time and circumstance. "I think," he said softly, "Sarah would be honored to have you complete her work. She always said the best quilts were made by many hands, that the love put into each stitch was what made them truly beautiful." Samuel, warm and content in the circle of their arms, chose that moment to speak his clearest word yet. "Home," he said distinctly, as if he understood exactly where they were going and why it mattered. As their buggy turned onto the familiar road that led to the farm, Eli could see his house in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney, warm light glowing in the windows, everything speaking of family life and permanent belonging. For the first time in 3 years, he was bringing children home to a house that would ring with laughter, echo with the sounds of growing up, and fulfill all the hopes that he and Sarah had carried but never had the chance to realize. The long journey that had begun with Anna's desperate walk through a blizzard was finally complete. They had found more than shelter from the storm. They had found family, belonging, and the fulfillment of prayers that have been 20 years in the answering. As they pulled into the farmyard, Anna looked up at Eli with eyes bright with tears and hope. "Uncle Eli," she said, "are you ready to be a papa?" "Anna," he replied, his heart full to overflowing, "I've been ready my whole life. I just didn't know I was waiting for you and Samuel to make it possible." 6 months later, spring had returned to the Pennsylvania countryside, where the gentleness that seemed to mirror the healing that had taken place within the walls of the Stoltzfus farmhouse. The apple trees that bordered Eli's property burst with white blossoms, and the fields showed the first tender green shoots of crops that promised abundance in the season to come. Inside the house, the transformation was even more remarkable. What had once been the quiet, ordered home of a solitary widower now rang with the sounds of family life. Anna's laughter as she helped with morning chores, Samuel's babbling as he explored every corner of his world with the fearless curiosity of a healthy 10-month-old, the gentle rhythm of domestic harmony that comes when people belong completely to each other. Anna had grown in the months since the custody hearing, not just physically, but in confidence and purpose. She had adapted to Amish community life with remarkable grace, learning Pennsylvania Dutch with the quick ear of childhood, mastering traditional skills from the women who had once viewed her arrival with suspicion, but now claimed her as one of their own. Her reading had progressed tremendously under Eli's careful instruction, and she had begun helping Martha Byler teach the youngest children in their small community school. But it was in the late afternoons, when the day's work was done and the house settled into evening quiet, that Anna's most meaningful project took shape. Sarah's quilting hoop had been moved to the front room, positioned by the large window where the light was best for detailed needlework. Anna had spent weeks learning the intricate patterns, the precise stitches that would transform individual squares into a unified whole. The baby quilt that Sarah had begun with such hope was finally nearing completion. Anna's stitches weren't as small or even as Sarah's had been. Experience comes only with time, but they were made with equal love, equal devotion to the family that the quilt would welcome and celebrate. "Look, Papa," Anna said on this particular spring evening, holding up her work for Eli's inspection. She had begun calling him Papa shortly after the court hearing, the name flowing as naturally as if she had been using it her entire life. "I think I have the border pattern right now." Eli examined her careful work, noting how she had chosen to incorporate small pieces from the dress she had worn on their first night together, fabric that carried the memory of her desperate journey, but now spoke of arrival, of belonging, of home. "It's beautiful, Anna. Sarah would be so proud of what you've accomplished." Samuel, who had recently mastered the art of pulling himself up to standing, used the edge of the quilting frame to practice his new skill. At 10 months, he was a sturdy, happy baby whose bright eyes and ready smile charmed everyone who met him. His vocabulary consisted of perhaps 6 clear words, but Papa and Anna were used with precision that left no doubt about his understanding of family relationships. "I want to finish it before Samuel's first birthday," Anna said, settling back into her work with the focused determination that characterized everything she approached. "So it can be part of his celebration, part of our family traditions." The mention of Samuel's birthday brought Eli's thoughts to the remarkable changes that had shaped their life together. The quarterly inspections mandated by the court had become routine visits that documented Samuel's excellent health, Anna's educational progress, and the deep bonds of affection that made their unconventional family work so naturally. Mr. Thompson had become not just an official monitor, but something approaching a family friend, often staying for supper when his duties brought him to their farm. The community's acceptance had been gradual but complete. Anna's respectful eagerness to learn Amish ways, combined with Samuel's irresistible charm, had won over even the most skeptical neighbors. Hannah Yoder, who had initially opposed their arrangement most strongly, now brought fresh bread twice a week and had begun teaching Anna the intricate art of preserving foods for winter storage. "Papa," Anna said suddenly, looking up from her quilting, "do you think Mama and Aunt Sarah can see us now? Do you think they know how happy we are?" It was a question that had shaped many of their evening conversations, the mystery of whether love persists beyond death, whether the prayers of the departed can still influence the lives of those they leave behind. Eli had come to believe that Sarah's presence in their home was more than mere memory, that her love had somehow guided Anna and Samuel to his door and continued to bless their family life. "I think," he said carefully, settling into his chair beside the quilting frame, "that love like theirs doesn't end with death. I think they're part of everything good that happens in this house, every moment of joy we share." Samuel chose that instant to take his first independent steps, releasing his grip on the quilting frame and tottering across the space between Anna and Eli with arms outstretched and an expression of pure delight on his face. He reached Eli's chair without falling, throwing his small arms around his papa's neck with triumphant laughter. "Did you see that?" Anna exclaimed, her quilting forgotten in the excitement of witnessing this milestone. Samuel really walked. Eli gathered the baby into his arms, marveling at how much this little boy had grown since that first night, when he was an undernourished infant wrapped in threadbare blankets. Samuel was thriving physically, emotionally, spiritually surrounded by the love and security that every child deserves, but not every child receives. As evening settled over their farm, Eli lit the oil lamps that would provide light for Anna's continued quilting. The familiar ritual marked the transition from day's work to evening family time, from the practical concerns of farming to the deeper satisfactions of relationship and belonging. "Anna," he said as she resumed her careful stitching, "there's something I want you to know. When your mother left our community all those years ago, it broke Sarah's heart because she thought the family was ending, that the love between sisters had been lost forever. But you and Samuel, you've proven that love is stronger than separation, that family bonds can survive anything." Anna looked up from her work, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think that's why God brought us to you? To heal the sadness that Aunt Sarah carried?" "I think," Eli replied, watching Samuel play contentedly at his feet, "God brought us together to heal all of us. Sarah's sadness, my loneliness, your fear of being alone in the world. Sometimes the best healing comes when broken pieces find each other and discover they fit together perfectly." Outside their window, the last light of day painted the Pennsylvania countryside in shades of gold and rose. Inside their warm kitchen, surrounded by the gentle sounds of family life, Anna continued her patient work on the quilt that would soon wrap another generation in the love that had survived separation, loss, and 20 years of unanswered questions. As Samuel fell asleep in Eli's arms and Anna completed another row of careful stitches, the house itself seemed to sigh with contentment. The empty rooms that had echoed with silence for 3 years now hummed with purpose and joy. The family Bible on the mantel bore new entries in Eli's careful script. Anna Morrison Stoltzfus, beloved daughter. Samuel Morrison Stoltzfus, beloved son, joined this family by God's grace and divine providence. 1894. "Papa," Anna said softly as she prepared to put away her quilting for the night. "I love you." "I love you too, daughter," Eli replied, the words flowing naturally despite the lifetime of waiting that had preceded them. "Both of you, more than I ever thought it was possible to love." And in that simple exchange, spoken in the quiet of a spring evening with Samuel sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, the long journey that had begun with a desperate knock on a door during a winter storm reached its true destination. Not just shelter from life's storms, but the permanent harbor of family love that makes all storms endurable and all arrivals feel like coming home.